torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio, radio with bite.
This podcast is made by female activists for human rights for all men, proudly female, and proudly MRA. We really, really, don't care. Fuck you and eat your heart out. Jasmine France, Valerie Solinas, Catherine McKinnon, Andrea Dworkin, Anita Sarkeesian, Rebecca Watson, Jennifer McCraven.
Hello and welcome to the Honey Badger Radio Show on our new platform on Live 365. My name is Allison Tiemann, otherwise known as Typhon Blue, and with me today is Karen Strawn, otherwise known as Girl Writes What, and Hannah Wallen. Today's topic is sexual assault in the military. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a big thanks to our two newest recruits, Alyssa and Rachel. These two lovely ladies have stepped up to the plate and helped us out by writing today's news and show segments. Rachel has a Tumblr where she writes under the name Naughty Nerd S. To see more of her work, search for Naughty Nerd S on Tumblr. That's Naughty Nerd S on Tumblr. Alyssa is a YouTube blogger under the name Alyssa Majorie. Her channel can be found at www.youtube.com/users/Alyssa Majorie. Link in the show notes. If you're listening and you want to volunteer to help us out, please drop us a line at honeybadgersradio@gmail.com. That is Honey Badgers plural, radio@gmail.com. Right now, we could use volunteers with experience creating custom WordPress themes and also a volunteer to help us with promotions. In addition, if you're interested in doing reviews of art, literature, or pop culture from a men's rights perspective, or if you have a punchline you'd like to see made into a webcomic, please submit your material to honeybadgersradio@gmail.com. That's honeybadgers plural, radio@gmail.com. You can also submit to us through the contact form on our website at www.honeybadgerbrigade.com. Thanks to everyone who has volunteered to help us so far. You really make the show work. And if you don't have time to volunteer, consider donating to the Honey Badger cause and help us spread a vile message of true equality further. To donate, go to the Honey Badger Brigade website at honeybadgerbrigade.com and click not on the PayPal button, but on the little card icons under the PayPal button. It's a bit tricky, but we only have smart people donating to us, so you should be able to figure it out. If you haven't already, please also subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/honeybadgerradio and add Honey Badger Radio to your Google Plus circles at plus.google.com/+simple Honey Badger Radio. Finally, you can find more information about the show, such as links and additional content, at blog.honeybadgerbrigade.com. And now, here's Hannah with the news.
Australian family courts are suffering due to lack of financial aid. More people are now representing themselves, leading to uncomfortable court sessions where both parties are questioning each other over the events that occurred. It was decided that if one party was unrepresented, the other would not receive funding for representation. Divorce is a complicated affair for the men and women of Australia. The story is on abc.net World Today. In other news, a high school senior at Ashtabula County Technical and Career Campus in Jefferson, Ohio, is being brought up on felony charges after an illegal search. Jordan Weiser was taking firefighting and EMT courses and hoped to one day become a police officer or firefighter after he got out of the Army. He was scheduled to ship out in August. Jordan's dreams were shattered on December 12th when administrators from the campus searched his person and vehicle without a warrant while denying him legal representation. The search was done after an alleged tip regarding his YouTube videos, including video games, merchandise, home defense tactics, and an interview with a local police officer. The principal stated that he had reason to believe Weiser was in possession of a weapon and proceeded to pat down the young man aggressively. Weiser did not give them permission to search his car, but they took the keys and did so anyway. He informed them to the contents of his vehicle and told them not to be alarmed. They found a stun gun he carried for self-defense, 2 airsoft rifles for a paintball match after school, and a pocket knife carried in his EMT kit to cut loose seatbelts. Weiser was arrested and jailed for illegal conveyance of a weapon onto school grounds, a Class 5 felony. He was in jail for 13 days and then released on a $50,000 bond with an ankle monitor. Weiser was also court-ordered to be 500 feet away from his dying grandfather after judges heard he wanted to store his firearms with him. This was all over a pocket knife. If this young man is convicted of a felony, he will never be able to follow his dreams and his life will be ruined. Weiser is scheduled to appear in court on April 1st for a pretrial hearing. A jury trial is scheduled for June 11th. The sexual assault trial of Brigadier General Jeffrey A. Sinclair was halted last Monday when it was found that the Pentagon was putting pressure on the prosecution to convict him. The court has decided to allow both sides to form a plea deal after an email surfaced from the accuser's lawyer mentioning that a plea deal would make the Army look bad. The charges in question came after the 3-year affair between the accuser and Sinclair was reported to Sinclair's boss. He was formally accused of assault, adultery, and other military crimes later that September. The alleged assault took place on 2 occasions, December 1st, 2011, and February 5th, 2012. The accuser says that on those occasions he forced her to perform oral sex. Civilian lawyer Richard Sheff says, "The government now has a big problem. It took pathetically weak assault charges and put a fancy wrapper around them. We just tore the wrapper off. The prosecution team no longer gets to distract us with salacious details about acts that aren't even criminal in the civilian world. All they're left with is a crime that never happened, a witness who committed perjury, and a pile of text messages and journal entries that disprove their claim." This Sunday it was revealed that the plea deal will drop all sexual assault charges against him and 2 others that would have required him to register as a sex offender. He will plead guilty to lesser charges. It is a victory for the defense and those that firmly believe this case was politically motivated in a time where sexual assault has become a hot-button issue.
And I believe that is the news, except for one item, a breaking news item. Anita Sarkeesian has been nominated for yet another award. Anita Sarkeesian has been nominated for the Ambassador Award at Microsoft's Women in Gaming Awards, apparently because she's a feminist who talks about games and she has a vagina. Her views creating games that appeal equally to men and women by appealing to no one at all has gained her yet another place in the spotlight. Congratulations, Anita. We salute your intrepid having a vagina-ness. And now on to the topic of the show. And to set the tone for tonight's discussion, here's some background on one of the events that set the sexual assault in the military witch hunt ablaze, the Jamie Lee Jones rape case. In 2009, Jamie Lee Jones was the face of sexual assault in the military. She was the perfect victim, a young, fresh-faced employee of KBR being deployed overseas for the first time. Jamie reported that she was drugged, gang-raped, and severely injured. The media couldn't find a better headline if they tried. It was a story that would tug on anyone's heartstrings, including those of Senator Al Franken, who passed legislation after hearing her story. This bill now forces companies like KBR to allow employees to take internal incidents to court. Unfortunately for the media, Jamie Lee Jones lied. What had been a simple tale of a party and a regretful one-night stand became the story of an innocent 20-year-old who was raped and who was roofied and gang-raped by firemen. In 2005, on the night in question, Jones was at a party with co-workers in Iraq and began to flirt with a firefighter by the name of Charles Bortz. Jamie was told that Bortz had a girlfriend, but this kept neither of them from going back to their room and spending the night together. It also didn't keep her from going to work the next morning or laughing and joking with coworkers. It was not until later that day, when she decided she felt unwell and needed to leave, the army doctor that examined her found no signs of foul play, merely some minor bruising. By the time it reached trial, Jamie was claiming that she had been severely bruised and bleeding. She reported a torn pectoral muscle, ruptured breast implants, and said that the army doctor had told her that she had been gang raped and penetrated vaginally and anally. All this was in direct conflict with the evidence. Her rape kit found no traces of date rape drugs or even that she'd had sex with multiple men. What the media also didn't know was that Jamie had a history of claiming that she'd been raped and then not filing charges, a total of 3 times. She had even longer history going to the hospital with complaints that doctors felt were imagined. She was on medications for anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. When the trial ended, Charles Bortz was acquitted of all charges, and Jamie was forced to pay $145,000 in legal fees. In the end, the story of Jamie Lee Jones is one of media bias and a trial that never had a leg to stand on. And with that, let's start the discussion of sexual assault in the military. Karen, did you want to chime in? You always have something to say.
You know, I actually really do want to chime in because in the period of time after Jamie Lee Jones was allegedly assaulted and KBR engaged in a cover-up, allegedly, she claimed that she was unable to leave her house. She was living in fear. She had post-traumatic stress disorder. She was, subject to chronic panic attacks and all of these things. Right, but during that time, she completed 2 university degrees, got married, and had 2 kids. Right, so I'm just like she seemed to have in this time when she was completely, absolutely, allegedly crippled by what had happened to her. She continued to live a normal life. Oh, and she also began a foundation, like a non-profit foundation. She wrote a book. She did all kinds of things during this period of time when she claimed that she was absolutely crippled by what had happened to her, allegedly. And I find it interesting, too, that when the investigation was done, because she had claimed that KBR covered up what had happened to her by locking her in a shipping container and posting armed guards. And when investigators went and did an investigation on that, they found that none of KBR's employees were armed with firearms. That they're not allowed to carry firearms. Everything in this case, from before she even was hired by KBR, when she filled out her application. She claimed she'd never been on any medications for any mental disorders, and then they found out she was on she had been on multiple medications for mental disorders during the trial. Prior to that, I mean, she lied on her application. She had accused a former boss of sexual assault over what appeared to be a consensual affair. I mean, she's and they claim that the evidence shows that she would check herself into a hospital or go to emergency with mysterious symptoms that only existed when people were watching, and when nobody was there to see her, she was fine, and then she'd notice somebody was watching, and she'd all of a sudden have a dizzy spell and pass out. Like this is clearly a woman who is deeply disturbed and deeply attention-seeking. And, Al Franken gave her the attention, and the media gave her the attention she was longing for. And it's kind of a poetic justice that she's now on the hook for $120-something thousand of KBR's legal fees to pay them back for all of the trouble she's caused them. I think that she may realistically owe more as far as how much of their reputation that she's dragged through the mud, right? And KBR is no friend of anybody who is anti-war. but they certainly didn't deserve this. They didn't do anything to deserve this. So there you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, really, this is a story of a witch hunt. Another story in which women are crying wolf. And what I find really interesting about this is if you actually look at the statistics regarding sexual assault in the military, not the ones of I mean, there's different sets of statistics, and they mean different things. For example, there are the sets of statistics of how many military people are actually reporting sexual assault.
Yeah.
But that's reporting to the authorities. That means that requires a person to believe that the authorities will listen to them and care about the sexual assault that they're reporting. So if you base it on those statistics, you find that it's 99% male perpetration. But really, the reality is that it's just most of the time when men or women are abused by men, they feel empowered to report it to the authorities because that is consistent with the conventional narrative. When the military does anonymous surveys and asks people, were you physically forced to have sex? Ask their military members, were you physically forced to have sex? A completely different picture emerges. And it's a really fascinating one. It's very counterintuitive. What the military men are saying is that 60% of them were sexually assaulted by women. That they have reported a female sexual assailant. Now that includes those who also report a male sexual assailant, but 60% of them report a female sexual assailant, and the number is lower for those reporting a male sexual assailant and a female sexual assailant. So in reality, there's more military men being raped by women than there are being raped by men. And what is really, really, really interesting is that there is a high percentage of civilians raping military men. So now they didn't, on these anonymous surveys, they do not break down whether the civilians are male or female, but by process of elimination, the simple fact is that a certain amount of the women raping these military men would have to be civilians by process of elimination. And so there is a significant problem with civilian women preying sexually on military men. And this is something that you hear nowhere. This isn't even on the radar when people talk about sexual assault in the military, even though this is actually consistent with the one guy that I've heard over and over and over again talking about sexual assault in the military, James Landreth. His experience was being raped by a pregnant civilian woman, and the instrument that she used to extort sexual compliance out of him was, of course, if you don't consent, I'll tell people that you raped me. And of course, that's really what makes military men so vulnerable to civilian women. I mean, who are you going to believe? If there is evidence that some sort of aggressive sex took place, and you have a civilian woman on one hand and a military man on the other, who are you going to believe was raped? Right? And that's what makes military men so vulnerable, is because they are put into a situation, a no-win situation. And none of this makes it out anywhere. There's not in the media. Certainly feminists aren't talking about it. We're not talking about how military men are vulnerable to female civilians. And the very thing that makes them vulnerable is the perception that they're strong and tough, and the perception that if anything happens, it's their fault. And like I said, you don't see it in, feminists aren't talking about it, media's not talking about it, nobody's talking about it but us. And the other thing is that the feminists come into this situation and they overlay all of their psychotic theories about toxic masculinity and hegemonic masculinity and how men rape to prove their masculinity. And in a hyper-masculine environment like the military, men are raping other men to prove their masculinity. And this transfers into the community, men raping women to prove their masculinity. And they overlay all of this guilt-tripping and shaming that then goes transferred into the so-called sexual awareness And this reality that there's a significant portion of male military men being raped by civilians just sort of disappears. It's not even, it's just not even referenced, not even spoken of, and it doesn't even exist in the feminist mind. And how can you start to deal with a problem? How can you start to legitimately create a solution to a problem if you are refusing to see aspects of it? You just don't want to see it because it doesn't fit your feminist narrative. So I thought I would put all that out there for discussion, because I find it remarkable, and just
I don't find it shocking. I really don't. Like we have the sort of perception that men are strong and women are weak, right? So, of course, when it comes to a sexual encounter that goes awry or that is dissatisfactory or unsatisfactory in some way, we automatically will assume that the man took advantage of the woman, right? Then you have a man who has been trained to kill people, to kill specifically other men, right? So he's the uber powerful male, and you have a civilian woman, right? So it's the exact same narrative. It's just the extreme is taken to either end, right? The uber male and the uber female, right? The man who is trained to be strong versus the woman who has no training to be strong, right? So I mean, it's not anything that I find shocking or remarkable in any way. I would expect that a man in the military who's victimized by a civilian woman would be even less able to get any kind of justice or any kind of recompense or anything like that for what he went through. But one of the things that really drives me nuts is this feminist idea that masculinity is, like, that men rape to prove their masculinity. Like, maybe in the most unhealthy population of males, right, that 3 to 5% of males, right, who have had no male role models, who were abused, who have had this horrible history of their upbringing, right? Maybe those males, because that's the only way they can prove their masculinity, is by dominating everybody in sight, right? Against their will. Maybe for those males, but for the average male, proving your masculinity is being the guy who steps in and defends the woman, the guy who steps in and says, "Wait a minute, you're not going to abuse her." Like you look at the entire history of male penned literature, right, and the male ideals of masculinity through all of classical literature, and all that you see is that a real man protects women. A real man does not harm women. A real man sees injustice toward women. A real man steps up and does something about it, right? And if he is conflicted about it, this is the absolute, it's an excruciating conflict if he's conflicted about defending that woman, right? So, you look at that and you think, this is what men feel masculinity is. This is what men feel the male ideal is, right? And it's only women who seem to think the male ideal is Rapey McRaperson. So, yeah.
Well, and then the other thing is that this feminist theory about why rape is, it completely omits why women rape. I mean, and the reality is that in this situation, I mean, military men in a lot of ways are very vulnerable to female predation. For the simple fact, well, one thing is that they have severe penalties that they know that they're going to deal with if there's sexual impropriety being brought up against them. But also, I've noticed that for men, the stronger and more able and more capable they are to inflict violence the less they want to do anything to women. Simple fact that the more they pause. They don't want to actually hurt women. So as a man becomes stronger, he's less likely to hurt women because he's worried about the consequences of hurting women, and that makes these men particularly vulnerable. And it's a horrible mindfuck. And I'm gonna open it up to Sage because he's been waiting here. And go ahead, Sage.
On that note, Karen mentioned in passing, and as well as Allison, that men would be in a position to want to protect women, especially if they were to be in a position as better protectors. But that kind of also draws in the question of, in the event that sexual assault is cast out as an accusation in the military, why is it that we never hear stories about some of these guys getting, well, I mean, I'm sure there are stories, but some guys getting completely beaten up by other soldiers or commanding officers nearby, which is something we would probably see happen. I mean, we know that, we remember that guy on the Indian game show, that How Can She Slap incident, where he was pummeled by a bunch of guys on that television show. And if people are willing to do that on television, you would think that soldiers would be ready to pounce on anybody who was even accused of sexual assault in a military environment. So, but instead, I'm hearing about cases, as in this KBR case, where instead we're hearing about something that kind of happened kind of behind the bushes, something that no one's ever seen. And then when people realize that there was that it wasn't as bad as it sounded, and we hear about this this incident where this woman is basically acting out in just whenever people are watching. Essentially, it is all a mind fuck. It is all about playing mind games and playing tricks. But I think that when it comes to guys being accused, we would also see physical evidence of the guys being beaten beyond recognition, because the reality is that guys would protect more than anything else.
Well, you know, I think actually that is, it's a huge thing. The fact that the people in that situation, in Jamie Lee Jones's case, that they did not beat the crap out of the man in question, that they did not back her up. They watched her party with, in the barracks with that guy. They watched her happily go off with him to, a private spot, right? They watched the entire thing play out, right? And as much as men are prepared to really come to women's rescue, and I think the more macho the man in many cases, the more I guess toxically masculine the man. I mean, look at men in prison, right? Men who rape women are second in line only to pedophiles for a shank in the ribs in the shower, right? So even the most toxic of men seem to see, victimizing women as something that's really not a good idea and not acceptable, right? But when you look at that and they think she has taken this kind of carte blanche privilege that she has, and she's turned it around and unjustly accused one of our brothers, right, of doing something that is absolutely heinous that we know he didn't do, right? Of course they're not going to back her up, right? And of course they're not going to attack the guy, right? In fact, I would think that would feel like a betrayal on the deepest sense of the code that they would maybe have of, you always defend a woman, you always defend the innocence, the fragility, of a woman. You would always do that unless she decides to turn that around and abuse your instincts, abuse your propensity to do that, and try and get you to do it in a way that's unjust. That would be a deep betrayal.
Well, yeah, and it does sort of speak to the idea that she really wasn't there. What they observed was not a woman who was appearing to be in any sort of distress. And that's exactly what it was. I mean, it pretty much came out. I mean, at this point, if she's paying out money, she definitely lied. And what's frankly amazing is that this whole witch hunt has come out of that particular story, and yet it was a civilian who said that she was attacked by guys who were in uniform, right? And yet it is civilian women who are, in many cases, constitute a huge predator, group of people who are preying on military men, and it just blows my mind. And again, this is just something that nobody is talking about. And I'm going to cede the floor to Sage. How's that? How's that for alliteration? Go ahead, Sage.
Oh no, I apologize. I actually, you actually articulated what I was about to say, so I have nothing else to add at this moment.
Okay, well then, Hannah, I'm going to pull you onto the floor. I'm pulling you in like a canoe.
Not by the hair, God.
Cut it short, and then nobody can do anything.
No, I'm not clipping my hair. No. But my big question is, because I really haven't followed this story as much, did she, besides having to pay legal fees, what other repercussions did she face legally?
I don't think she faced any other legal repercussions other than having to pay KBR's entire defense bill. So that I think was a significant penalty. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, that kind of depends. I mean, is she ever actually going to come up with that money?
Oh, she'll declare bankruptcy, or she did. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I know that judgments do follow you, and I know that she'll never, if she ever gets a significant portion of money, they'll take it. Mm-hmm. But if she doesn't, if she stays middle class or lower middle class, and so on.
If she continues to rely on her new husband's income.
Yeah, if she doesn't have her own income, yeah. So it's not really even a penalty. She's basically gotten away with this. And Rachel's reminding us in chat, don't forget the bit about it being against the rules. Have sex with your commanding officer, you can get in real trouble. So crying rape is a way out. So not only did she not really get penalized for this, the way, say, the guys would have gotten penalized if they'd been convicted. She really isn't facing anything, and she's gotten out of penalties that she would have faced if she had been been punished for having sex with her commanding officer.
Well, actually, I think we're confusing two different episode or events. There's the Jamie Lee event. And then there is also the event that has been more recent, which is the Brigadier General Jeffrey A. Sinclair, and what's interesting about that one is everybody's condemnation is going on to him, and now that it's really looking like it's probably not a sexual assault case, they're talking about how he committed adultery, but then so did she.
Well, yeah, I understand that it's my understanding that committing adultery in the military is actually a really significant crime. I've had friends I have one particular friend whose wife left him in all but the legal sense. She moved out, she took the kids, she shacked up with another guy, she wouldn't give him a divorce, and she basically, let him know she's going to rake him over the coals if he did divorce her. And then she stalked him to make sure that he wasn't dating another woman, because if he dated another woman, she could accuse him of adultery and go after him even harder. But my basic thing on this is, here we have a situation where this woman has done something despicable, and there's no repercussions against her that are going to actually put her through any kind of dissuasive punishment that somebody else might look at and say, gee, I might be held responsible if I lie about this. I should only say this if it's true.
Well, with Jamie Lee Jones, you're right. I mean, she has this fine, but she can go for bankruptcy.
Well,
And-
I think Jamie Lee Jones though is she's a unique case because like from everything that I've read about her, and frankly, if the publication Mother Jones is publishing an article that I mean, this is where I learned all about the Jamie Lee Jones case, and they are an extremely left-wing publication. They are an extremely anti-war, anti-military industrial complex publication. And they expose the entire thing, and I think she's a unique case. I think she's a case of the very, very small percentage of women who have Munchausen syndrome, and it was just that it managed to catch the public interest enough and catch political interest enough at the right time in order to get all kinds of attention, all kinds of sympathy, and to get Al Franken to propose legislation that would change the way military contractors, private contractors with the military, could adjudicate grievances in-house. That previously the law had the contracts could stipulate that any grievance you have with the employer is binding arbitration, and now the door is open for anyone to sue, right, in a civil court. So yeah, it really was just kind of this perfect storm of mental illness and political gullibility, right? So
yeah, it's but wait a second, Girl Writes What? I mean, or sorry, Karen. So you're saying that there's a small percentage of women who have Munchausen's by proxy. So this false rape
not by proxy.
culture.
Hers was not by proxy. Hers was just
Munchausen's by direct. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a small percentage of women like that. Well, I don't think that's right. I think that this behavior by this woman represents the behavior of all women. I mean, like 2 or 3% of women have this problem. No, this is all women. Just like all men are responsible for the behavior, for the dysfunctional, emotionally unstable behavior of 2 to 3% of men. I think that makes sense to me.
Munchausen syndrome is like toxic masculinity. It's
toxic
across
femininity.
the board, right? Yeah.
It's toxic femininity. So all women bear blame. Should bear the burden of shame of Jamie Lee Jones' behavior.
Well, I know I feel deep shame for having a vagina in common with Jamie Lee Jones. So.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's a horrible image. Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. I'm not scissoring her for Christ's sake. I have a vagina. She has a vagina. That's all I'm saying. I'm not implying anything untoward.
Maybe it's just the whole having something in common. Anyway, let's move on.
Well, I wanted to say one thing. Calling Munchausen's a female or toxic femininity it is highly appropriate because it's something that both men and women do. There are men with Munchausen's and there are women with Munchausen's, and that is an exact parallel to toxic masculinity, which is an attribution to masculinity of things that happen to both sexes.
Well, yes, but Munchausen syndrome, just like cluster B personality disorders, are more common in women than they are in men, right? Just like certain other behaviors are more common in men than they are in women. Certain harmful behaviors like drug addiction and alcohol addiction and things like that.
Well, possibly,
right?
Or possibly they're more noticed or more condemned.
More diagnosed, perhaps. But I would say that from everything that I've read about the extreme male brain and the extreme female brain, Simon Baron-Cohen and the researcher on the extreme female brain was called Badcock, ironically. Yes, these types of things, the narcissism, the desire for attention, the desire for sympathy, all of these things that would lead to Munchausen syndrome or Munchausen syndrome by proxy would be more common in women. That doesn't mean that they are across the board attributable to all women, but they are more common in women than they are in men.
I think the conclusion
I
from
could
all
get into
this,
a really long discussion with you on all this, but we do have a caller, and
I just
as
wanted
James
to say,
is pointing out.
yeah, I know James is pointing out. That's sort of why I interjected. But in part, I wanted to say that the idea that there's this toxic femininity and toxic masculinity, it seems like it's just something that's totally distracting from the issue, which is just simply people being abused. And yes, I know we have a caller, but I wanted to put out our call-in number is 214-666.
Yeah.
6148. Our call-in number again is 214-666-6148. If you have anything you want to say to this topic, if you want to talk to us, please do call in 214-666-6148. And we're going to bring in a caller who has been waiting very patiently to speak. James, pull in our caller. Hello?
Hi.
Kettlebell.
How's it
Hi,
going?
you're on the air.
All right. Well, I have an experience related to sexual assault in the military for sure. I was in the military myself, and it's kind of a long story. I'm going to try to keep it as concise as possible. But I went to a school, a long military school, and one of the guys that I went to school with, I went to a unit with, and there was a party that he was at with another soldier, and he was talking to a female there, and went to her room together, and there was signs of cooperation. There was all the signs of consent were there, and after that evening, there was an accusation, and I pretty much watched the entire situation unfold all the way to the legal proceedings, and it's quite a shocking experience, to say the least.
You can give some more details if you want, if you feel that you'd like to.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Not identifiable details, but I mean, was it a situation that you felt that she was believed without any question?
I mean, I was even there for everything that happened legally and like the evidence that was presented, and it was just there was so much evidence to the contrary that laughter, being heard, and all this stuff. There was so much hearsay that was part of the legal proceedings that did not end well, to say the least. And
okay, so was the man charged with, or was he eventually decided? Was there any repercussions for him?
Yeah, probably the worst repercussions you could think of. So,
was he discharged from the military? Dishonorable discharge?
No, worse. He's not a free man at this moment. And,
Court-martialed and convicted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So I mean, I've been listening to A Voice for Men, since the beginning. It was one of the main experiences that kind of led me to that point. And just being at military units, just there's so many guys that go through divorces and child support stuff, and it all just adds up.
Oh no, it's incredible.
It's a pretty rough climate,
It is incredibly difficult. It's a really, really difficult place to be in the military as a man. If you have anything to do, if you're attached to a woman or you attach yourself to a woman, it's. I mean, Night Runner just posted a comment. He said, by making the rules accused equals guilty, feminists are giving women a weapon to force men to have sex with them. If you don't have sex with me, I'll scream rape. It's no different than a gun or a knife. And, really, does it matter? Does it matter whether she holds the gun or the knife to his throat before he consents to sex or after? I mean, that's the real thing. Either she's forcing him to have sex or she's forcing him to face consequences that he should not face because he had sex, right? This is really, and the prevailing narrative is what allows women to do this, right? It's, women are victims, men are perpetrators, and men in the military are, of course, big and strong and tough, and they would never allow themselves to be victimized, and civilian women are weak and fragile and delicate flowers, and of course they're easily taken advantage of, right? And you even see that in divorce cases when men come home from the field, they come home from being deployed, and they come home to divorce papers and a temporary restraining order and a child support order that's 6 months old, right? That they have to pay, and because he's the big bad guy, and they will even say in court, these women and their lawyers will even say, well, he's killed people, therefore he's not safe around the children, right? So we need to deny him access to his children because he's killed people while serving his country, right? I mean, how this is like the ultimate pit of, unable to claw your way out of. It's just the most atrocious, horrible, horrendous thing to ask a man to serve his country in that way, and then say, because you served your country in that way, now you are unfit to be around your children.
Yeah, it is.
But you still get to pay for them.
It's a really hard situation to be in, and the reality is that our perception of these guys' strength is exactly the thing that makes them most vulnerable. Because we just don't believe, we don't think that we even need to take care of them. They can just be thrown aside when they're no longer useful, right? They're strong. If they break, that's their own fault. And I think that female predators, they have a sixth sense for this kind of thing. They have a sixth sense for these psychological corners that they can back people into. And I think that's really what's happening in part with this sexual assault in the military. There are female predators who can perceive that they can back these men into these corners. It doesn't matter how strong you are if the entire system is arrayed against you, against recognizing your vulnerability and arrayed for recognizing even the false vulnerability of your attacker. I mean, it's a horribly tenuous situation to be in and very, very sinister. But let's move on to the next caller. Thank you, Kettle, for the call. And please do call in again sometime. And the next caller is Fred. Fred, you're on the air. Can you hear me? Hello, Fred. Hello. I can hear that something is happening again, so let's just keep going with the show. What I was saying before we ended up off the air was that I was just amazed at how we can just disregard the vulnerabilities of the men in uniform, and we do it because we perceive their agency to be so great. And if they can't help themselves, then they deserve whatever comes to them. So, Fred, can you hear me, Fred? Hello? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like the show is back online.
Okay, Sage is here. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good.
We've got a bit of an echo going there.
A little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so Fred, are you there, Fred? Fred.
I think Fred's a poltergeist.
Yeah, I think Fred is the guy who crashed the system. I think we should just let Fred go.
Okay, Fred, we're letting you go. We're sorry, but unfortunately,
Fred was also the name of my daughter's hamster, and he was one of those hamsters that dies long before the pet shop says that his life expectancy is. So,
Well, if Fred manages to get back on, we can always chat with him then. But until then, I guess we're just stuck with each other.
Yeah, no.
Stuck in the middle with you, eh?
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up, though, is that military men, like my ex, was in the Air Force. And he was court-martialed and went to prison, and he was honorably discharged after he served his sentence. But what landed him in prison was he got into a fist fight with a superior officer, and the fist fight was over the superior officer calling the woman that my ex was sitting at a table with in the bar a rude name, right? So he was defending the honor of a woman, a civilian woman, and he ended up serving 6 months in military prison, 2 months of it in solitary confinement, and was lucky enough to receive an honorable discharge at the end of it, right? So, I mean, like, this is what military men are. It's not military men are rapey, beady bastards. Military men are more likely to be chivalrous, to be courteous to women, to defer to women, to be all of those things that masculine literature has extolled about masculinity. You defend women, you protect women, you do all of these things for women that, you would never, ever, ever allow a man to speak in vulgar terms about a woman in your presence, right? You'd never, ever do that. That's going to get your lights punched out if you do that, right? That's what military men are about. And the entire idea that because the sort of the hyper-masculinity of men in the military makes them more rapey and more beady around women, that's just bizarre to me, because all of the codes of masculinity that I have come across, all of the ideals of masculinity that are male-driven and male-propelled and male-perpetuated and male-taught are respect women, treat women with kindness and deference, be chivalrous, be protective, respect your mother, protect your sisters, right? All of those things. And, the military exemplifies that. So the idea that men in the military have this kind of toxic masculinity that makes them prone to beating and raping women, that just seems absurd to me. It really does. So, I don't know if anyone wants to weigh in on that, but it just seems bizarre to me.
Well, it is bizarre. It's a situation where they're saying the exact opposite of what men really are, and the reason why it works is because you really can't shame someone for something that they don't care about, that they really couldn't give a shit about. Like, if men really didn't care about women, no matter how much you said, "Oh, you don't care about women, and you're acting so badly," they'd be like, "Oh, well, give me a medal. I want my gold star." But anyway, I wanted to move on to bring Fred on the show. We're going to try this again. Fred. Hello, Fred. Are you there, Fred?
Oh, God. Fred, you're nothing but problems.
Oh, God. It's like Fred is the ghost of the system.
Hold on.
Fred, it's just nothing but toxic masculinity with you. There's problems.
Ahead,
you're
James.
raping me with your silence.
Fred is actually with us. I don't know why he isn't talking.
Okay, well, why don't we silence Fred and go on to Drago?
Okay, sorry about this, Fred, but if you can hear us, we're going to have to hang up on you, man. Okay, we are going to go ahead and pull in Drago. Guys, try to keep in mind, it usually takes a good 5 seconds. Good 5 seconds for me to be able to transfer, so just one moment.
All right. Okay, I'm waiting for Drago. Hello, Drago.
Hello. Thanks for having me on the show. All right, hey. Yes, one of the things that I think that's going on in the armed forces right now that I think is interesting is that they're finally opening up what you call combat jobs or combat MOSs to women. They're finally lifting the ban, and it seems like a lot of what you are describing on the show could ultimately be a distraction within combat units. I just want to know, what are your guys, ladies' thoughts on it?
I'll let one of my co-hosts or Sage speak to that.
Okay.
Do you guys have anything to say on this issue?
Well, honestly, yeah, it's really hard to work with someone if you have to live in fear that they're going to make an accusation against you. And I think what's happened in the civilian world with human resources departments adopting feminist points of view is going to be a problem in the military. Because you cannot have men and women working together in an environment where women have all the power to accuse and throw their weight around using, thought-terminating cliches like misogyny. Everything is misogyny if she doesn't like it, or if she can say that it makes her feel uncomfortable or unhappy in any way. That kind of problem takes away from the kind of cooperative environment that's absolutely necessary to have in the military or any other high-stress work environment.
Well, yeah, especially when you're talking about combat arms, like for example an infantry unit. Cohesion is everything, and when you have distractions, okay. In other words, when you have people that are worried about, excuse me, a little noise. When you have people worried about, is there going to be a sexual harassment charge, or did I offend somebody, or even the female infantryman saying, am I meeting the standard? All those things create a distraction. When you have distractions like that, you reduce cohesiveness, and that reduces combat effectiveness, and that's almost a death sentence for these combat units, and it can be dangerous, very dangerous.
Well, this actually reminds me of a situation that a friend of mine explained. There was one of my friends, her husband was stationed in Haiti. This is years ago, and it was just when they had really gone into full swing with all of it was after Tailhook, and so there was all of this sexual harassment awareness going on in the military. And where they were stationed, there was a female recruit who kind of lost her mind. And it's sometimes being stationed in a specific situation for a long time can really wear on your nerves. And if you've already been through some stuff, or you're just not cut out to take it, it can drive you to behave in ways that you would never behave at any other time. And she just sort of stripped off all of her clothes and started screaming and yelling and throwing things. And because she was female and everyone else there was male, they couldn't do anything for her. Even though she was butt naked in the Haiti sun and not accustomed to it, they couldn't help her. Because if any of them approached her, he risked a sexual harassment charge or sexual assault charges or any other kind of accusation related to sexual violence because she was naked and female. And so they actually had to bring in other women to do something for her. And of course, by the time they got there, she was sunburned. And that's one effect. But the other effect is that, very simply, you cannot expect someone else to have your back if you know how tempting it is for them to stab it.
Yeah.
Well, Sorry, go ahead.
Can I just, Drago, can I just get you to not breathe into the microphone? It's just creating a lot of feedback and noise. Just be careful with that. That's okay. Anyway, Karen, go ahead.
Okay, well, one other thing that I think is a real danger as far as cohesiveness of units is that, if you look at what's going on in the atheist community right now, in the skeptical community, you basically have a situation where, sort of sparked by Elevator Gate, by Rebecca Watson being asked for coffee in an elevator, and it resulted in Richard Dawkins getting boycotted and all kinds of horrible nastiness, and like it's still playing out now, even now, right? As far as the sort of the more feminist women in the community trying to, I guess, colonize it and turn it to their purpose, turn it to the I would guess they would call the female agenda, right? And they play up the dangers and the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault and all of these things, right? And the harm to women, right? The reason why that's effective is because men respond to it, right? The reason why those kinds of tactics are effective, playing up, women are being victimized, women are being harassed, women are being assaulted, is because men respond to it in a way that is protective of women, right? And most men will do that. And if you actually look at what's going on in the atheist community and the skeptical community right now, if that was going on 4,000 years ago, right, there would be a pile of dead bodies over that, right? There would be a pile of dead bodies. And, so you look at what's going to happen when women are integrated into combat units, right? And we have, like men have an instinctive or a socialized or a both, combination of the two, a desire to protect women, to keep them safe from harm, to avenge them when they are harmed, right? And this is not an indictment of men. This is something that I think has kept humanity alive and successful for millennia, right? This urge on the part of men to protect and defend women, right? But when you integrate women into a sphere where they are competing one-on-one with men and they have to work in conjunction with men, and you have any kind of, if there's any kind of, sexual assault, sexual harassment, blah, 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 like look what's happening in the military right now. There's almost a hysteria going, and it's not over sexual assault of men. It's only since women raised, sounded the clarion that anybody cares, right? And so, you have, what's this going to do for combat cohesiveness when you have a woman thrown into a whole bunch of men, and the moment that she says that some man in that unit wronged her, right, what's going to happen? Like, seriously, what's going to happen? Because, what's happening in the atheist community, what's happening in the skeptic community, what's happening with Anita Sarkeesian receiving awards even though she's hated by the majority, I would say, of the gaming community, right, is that the powerful among those men are saying, let's side with the woman, and the men who are being wrongfully charged with being horrible are getting thrown under the bus. And how is that going to affect a combat unit's ability to do their job?
Well, probably very negatively. And if we do want to integrate women into the military, the feminist approach is definitely not the one to take, because feminism just encourages women's sense of victimhood and sense that people owe them a world of farting sunshine and rainbows and sparkles.
A world, yeah. Only one? Yeah.
Oh, they owe them all. Take all the dimensions. All of the dimensions have to be sparkles and rainbows.
Yeah, all the parallel universes.
Yeah.
Unicorns farting rainbows.
In all the parallel universes. We do want you guys to call in if you have something to say to the topic or you just want to talk to us. The call-in number again is 210, sorry, I keep making that mistake, 214-666-6148. That is again...
You never make a mistake on the 666. I wonder why that is. You evil evil, evil, horrible harridan.
Yes, I am the cuntatrix.
Self-hating misogynist.
Well, anyway, how is it that I'm simultaneously just in love with myself and self-hating? I mean, a feminist, explain that. Anyway.
I don't, yeah, agree.
The call-in number again is 214-666-6148. That's 214-666-6148. Hannah says, "Yeah, the trans-dimensional unicorns, feminist unicorns, should be shitting butterflies."
They should be.
Anyway, but
if they're not, it's misogyny.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, the idea that the world exists to make you comfortable is this very female idea. That everybody around you exists to make you comfortable. That men shouldn't be fresh. That men should put their coats over puddles and open your open doors for you and pull out chairs, or the modern incarnation of chivalry, which is mind their manners if they're to avoid being called misogynists, right?
Man Up, an organization designed to stop men from victimizing women.
Yes, but they have to do all those things only when you want and not when you don't want, and they should just automatically know which is which.
Right, and when you actually go up and do it, all of a sudden you're marginalizing them, and you're not actually trusting them to take care of themselves.
Yes. Yes. And it's all.
In other words, men suck.
Feminists put the miss in misogyny.
So, Drago, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's it. You probably have a lot more callers, so, thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, well, you're welcome. The reality is that this format is a little slower than the Blog Top format, so, I mean, if you did have anything to add, we have time, so...
No, that's it. I got to wake up to go to work, go to sleep so I can wake up in time.
Well, have a good sleep, and thank you for calling in, and do call in again.
All right, I will. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Once again, that number is 214-666-6148. Please do call in if you want to talk to us or talk about the show topic. And, we're sort of getting a little slow here on the topic. Does anybody else want to jump in with something that's burning some aspect of this topic that we haven't covered so far?
Actually, yes. I'm gonna try pulling Fred on again, and we'll see what we can do here. Fred, welcome to the show.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Fred. Oh my God, he's real!
Oh my God! I don't know what it was with my phone. I looked at the phone both times when the call disconnected, and they both disconnected at around between the 6 to 6:30 minute mark. I don't know. I sincerely think my phone is either possessed or there's some type of feature that's turned on my phone that if there's no activity on the line, it just drops the call. I don't know. But anyway, I'm through, so it's a footnote now.
Okay.
Excellent.
So what were you bringing to the table?
I am currently an active duty member of the United States Air Force, so I have a little bit of insight on this. Back when this whole thing kicked off, I think it was back in the early part of 2013, March, April, May timeframe, somewhere like that. Congress caught wind of all this stuff going on, and the crap storm began. And some of the rhetoric that was being pushed around that was that, and still even today, it's that military or sexual assault in the military is reaching. It's an epic problem. I'm sure you guys have probably heard this at some point in your reading or watching of television or whatnot. And I'm a statistics guy, and so I like finding statistics on things. So I did a little research before the show, about 2 hours before the show started, and I pulled some numbers off the internet. We have approximately, when you add up all active duty, National Guard and Reserve components of the active duty branches, and civilians as well. And the reason why I include all of those is because when it comes to the sexual assault numbers that the United States military tracks, all individuals from those components, including civilians, are added into the numbers. So when you add it all up, the estimate is about 3 million people currently in the United States military who are in some type of role. Contractor, whatever. The rules apply across the board for everybody.
Like KBR. Like working under contract for KBR.
KBR is, I when I was in Afghanistan in 2006, they were there, and I don't know if they see, there's a difference between a civilian contractor and a Department of Defense civilian contractor. Both of them are working contracts for the United States military, but when it comes to the rules and regulations in which they fall under, regular private military contractors fall under different rules, and I believe Halliburton is not a Department of Defense civilian contractor, or they're not Department of Defense civilians. They're a third-party hired company that's brought into the the AOR to do various duties. So I don't think they fall under rules. Don't get me wrong, but they don't fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice or anything like that. So
no,
you got to keep that kind of in mind. Like I said, they fall under rules, but I'm not exactly sure what specifically they do. But these civilian numbers, I do not believe are added into there, but maybe they are. However, about 3 million, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. If you do the numbers, the most conservative estimate from what I was researching online, this was off of a CBS News website article from last May of once all this stuff started hitting the fan. And there's the military, the Pentagon estimates 26,000 victims. This is due to what you guys were talking about earlier, online polls of, were you sexually assaulted or not, etc. When I hear the word estimate, that's almost as good to me as being just almost a false statistic. Estimate is just an estimate. I mean, you can, I can sit here and say, well, I estimate there was 100,000 bank robberies last year, but I mean, unless I've got the actual people, unless I have actually 26,000 people that will sit there and tell me, yes, I was sexually assaulted, then I'm not going to put too much stock in that number. But the number I do put stock in is they said that there were about 3,600 victims, confirmed 3,600 victims within the last year or so. So even at the most conservative number, if you take the most conservative number, which is 3,600, up against that 3 million people, you get 0.12% of all those people are actually victims of sexual assault. Now, for the record,
0.12?
What's that? 0.12%. If we're going off of the 34 to 3,600 victims, it's about 0.12% of all individuals in some type of serving capacity in the military are victims. So that's pretty low. Not that I'm discounting those sexual assaults. If those sexual assaults happened, I have zero tolerance for it, as I'm sure you guys do as well, and many of the listeners that are listening currently right now, zero tolerance for that. At the largest estimate, if you go by the 26,000 victims number, that jumps up to about 0.9% of those 3 million. So still, less than 1% of all the military are the victims of sexual assault. So the reason why I bring these statistics up is because I think it's important to keep this in perspective. When the military and the news came out and said sexual assault is running rampant in the United States military, I just had to kind of cock my head sideways for a second and say, seriously, are you really saying
less
that?
than 1%?
Yeah, nobody's putting these numbers in statistics. Now, I know from 2011 to 2012, or was it 2012 to 2013? I can't remember. But there was a jump from 19,000, the estimate of 19,000 to 26,000, which, if that's true, that's a pretty significant jump. I mean, that's a jump of like more than 25%, or about 25%, I think. Maybe a little bit more than that. No, about half, excuse me. If you're going from 19,000 to 26,000, that's an additional, 7,000? So, yeah, about a jump of 60%. So if that's true, that's significant. But, again, like I said, estimates are estimates. Take them for what you will. further down in the CBS article I was reading, they said that 88% of the ones that were reported were women. So, by the transitive properties of math, that would mean 12% are men. So what I have to figure is, why does feminism get involved in this, or why is feminism able to permeate? I know I'm doing a lot of talking and not letting you guys get in the word edgewise, so I apologize.
No,
if
go
you guys
ahead.
want to say anything, please just stop me. But what I can estimate is, for as progressive as the military is getting with its policies, like for instance, possibly letting women into military combat roles. The military still, in large part, at least as far as the rules and regulations, especially when it comes to Uniform Code of Military Justice, a very traditionalist military.
Mm-hmm.
It places a lot of emphasis on making sure that the military nuclear family is taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the support that's given. Plenty of money goes into programs that are there to help the military family. And so when it comes to traditionalism, who better loves exploiting traditionalism than feminists? So it's very easy for them to get in there. It's very easy for them to get in there and say and make out the women exactly how they want to paint them, as the pretty pink princesses who can do no wrong, and false rape. What's that? It's a problem that I have seen in the military. I don't see it as much today, but again, I'm more higher ranking now, and my view is a little bit more
broad,
tunnel vision than it was.
Okay.
I've got a couple things to add to this conversation. Having served quite some time myself, Fred is right when he says that there are a lot of organizations within the military structure that are devoted toward helping families. You've got financial services, you've got meetings and groups for wives and children while husbands are off on deployment, or husbands and children, and things of that nature. But all of that works up until a point where you sort of buttress up against keeping people mission capable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen multiple occasions where an individual is having some very specific family problems who has run into all kinds of trouble with with their chain of command, because of these problems and the fact that it is affecting mission readiness. And all of a sudden they find themselves, soldiers in particular, sort of locked out of promotions, locked out of unit respect, things of that nature. And I see this happen especially when things like divorce or cases of spousal abuse or sexual assault come up. A lot of these soldiers are not given the attitude that comes with due process.
Absolutely. Yep, there is a. I know me and my wife were having some issues when it came to in the beginnings of our marriage. I won't go into details on that. Nobody, I'm sure, is interested. But there was. We were separated, not legally, but my wife wanted the BAS, basic allowance for food and all that stuff, and the unit was definitely made sure that I provided that to her, even though our son at the time, she entered the marriage with the child already. I was not legally his guardian. I wasn't on his birth certificate, but there was a very mad push for making sure that I got her exactly what she needed, with no question. Otherwise, I was going to feel the pain, because that was it was something that was very they're very adamant about. There was no. I tried to argue my case, but they were like, no, not having any of it. So, but and you're right when it comes to things like as soon as the wife starts going off about things like domestic abuse or making accusations of adultery, there is a very large stigma, like was being talked about at the beginning of the show, when it comes to attitude of big, strong military man, little, weak military wife, and she's having all this undue punishment and hardship done onto her by her military husband, and it can get very unfair. I, fortunately enough, have not experienced any of that personally, but I do know people who have, and people who have been, are in custody fights, child support. I mean, I have a coworker who's going through child support issues right now. His ex-wife wants back child support because of issues with him being promoted or whatnot, and his child support was never adjusted or something like that. I don't know, 50 states, 50 different child support laws, but go ahead. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say this predates this attitude. These concurrent attitudes predate the late 80s when the EEOC started to drop down from echelon level into the unit level, and the feminists really
Wait, James, what's the EOC? Could you explain that?
Equal Opportunity Commission. You've got your equal opportunity officers and things of that nature. That was at an echelon level at one time. That means like Pentagon and maybe a couple steps below, maybe a division. Okay, they would sit at a division headquarters and take in complaints. But in the late 80s, what they started to do is they started to push representatives down into the unit level, meaning your individual companies of 100 or so people all of a sudden had a representative in there, and the training that they were getting as early as 92, I know this for, because of my own experience, was misandric as hell.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Okay, and this was as early as 92. So what we're looking at here is we are looking at these traditions and these attitudes that extended far before anything ever came down to the individual unit level back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And they're being married to feminist ideology. Yep. And this is where we find that the military and feminism clicked almost perfectly together. This is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to the saying that traditionalism and feminism are two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely.
Because the military latched onto that shit and ran with it. All the gynocentrism, all the chivalry that the military was already steeped in since the inception of the military, it was so easy for them to take that next step and be able to push out essentially misandric material directly at the unit level, call our soldiers pieces of shit, continue to not provide the attitudes of due process to those soldiers for any cases of sexual assault, spousal abuse, things of that nature.
Military readiness type, as far as the denying due process. Right. Well, we need to make sure you're military ready. So to make sure that you're fully mission capable. This is what's going to happen, and that's it.
Exactly. And so the soldier's concerns with what is happening with his own family is all of a sudden being slammed against the wall of military readiness, of being mission capable. And as a result, he often finds himself, or herself in some cases, completely outside any real support systems and at the mercy of the whims of his superior officers.
Yep. And I mean, what you're saying, I mean, if anybody has any doubts, because I know there are plenty of listeners out there who are not military, who don't have military family members, when we talk about the misandric tone that was in the military, especially in the 90s, I went through military basic training in 1995. And when it came to the briefings on sexual assault, but like he said, there was very much misandric tones in them. I didn't realize it at the time. I was not, definitely did not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm an 18-year-old kid, did not see feminism in my rearview mirror. I was just, young, dumb, and stupid, just, going forward, okay, well, this is what the military tells me, then it must be true. But, thinking back on it, and I'm sure you can agree with this, that it's true. You went through some of the barracks, especially in infantry units. You would see the posters up saying, reminding you, date rape is a crime, no means no, things like that. And even today, when it came to, today meaning, present time, the military's stance, or at least one of the military stances on this is, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. I think that in and of itself is a very negative thing to say to somebody. Because I mean, me personally, as an active duty military member, I'm not doing anything to actively prevent sexual assault. I mean, I of course have a zero tolerance policy against anything like that, but I'm not actively engaged in anything. So I guess according to the military, I'm part of the problem. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And one other thing I'll go over, and then I'll get off the line because I've taken up enough of you guys' time. Again, I appreciate to be able to come on and talk about this because it is something that I am pretty passionate about. But when they had their sexual assault stand-down day, the entire military had to dedicate a day to education on sexual assault and all of that. I remember, I forget exactly what the quote is. I'd have to look it up. But it was right there on the I can only speak for the Air Force. I can't speak for the Army or the Navy or the Marines. But right there on the, what's right there on the PowerPoint presentation, there was a quote, and I copied and pasted this into Google and did a search on it. And this paragraph, pretty much word for word, was feminist rhetoric. I mean, I'm talking about like the military just ripped it off of a feminist webpage and stuck it on their PowerPoint presentation to present to the troops as, this is true. I'll have to look it up, and maybe I'll private message it to one of the radio hosts so that they can see it. But yeah, it's I can definitely see it, see the feminist influence there. They're definitely not going to go away anytime soon. And I only thank my stars that I've only got a couple of years left in the military, and then I'm out, and I won't have to deal with this type of stuff.
Well, I wanted to, before you go, I wanted to address something that you said earlier. They actually put forth statistics that 88% of the victims of rape in the military are female and 12% are male. Is that what they were saying?
What I saw, I got this from CBS.com. This was not from a Pentagon website or any military website, But and this was from May 2013. So maybe the numbers are different now, but CBS said 88% of the confirmed victims, of the 3,600 whatever cases that they have, 88% of them were women. So if 88% were women, the other 12% has to be men.
Yeah,
So
but here's the thing. Confirmed cases, I'm assuming that means that went to trial. But once again, that's another step.
Reported, yes. Mm-hmm.
But you see, there's another step because there are anonymous surveys, and then there's the reported to the authorities, and then there's going to trial and actually convicted, right? And in each step, you lose male victims because they aren't served by the system, which is one of the big problems with the feminist approach to sexual violence and assault, is that they don't seem to have any consideration for the problems that men face in reporting this stuff. And that is an incredibly misleading statistic.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree with you one bit. I mean, they didn't. It said 88% of women. It didn't even bother to say, well, then 12% is men. It wound up. It went down further. I didn't copy down all the statistics because I didn't want to throw a ton of numbers into everybody's heads and just get them confused. But it did break it down by number reported, number that went to trial, number that were convicted, what convicted of, all that. But nowhere in that breakdown was it talking about males at all.
I'm not surprised.
It wasn't specifically saying, 800 were, women, but it wasn't saying anything about men. But
yeah, well, I mean, they don't. And one of the big things that really shocks me is that they don't, well, it doesn't shock me at all. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest, but that they do not actually reference anything to do with the fact that a significant portion of the men in the military who are sexually assaulted by women. And a significant portion of those by civilian women. So the whole... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, physically assaulted by women, or like you guys were saying earlier, mentally assaulted. If you don't do this for me, I'll say that you raped me. It doesn't even necessarily have to be, sexual in nature. If you've got, because we have a lot of civilians in the military that are supervised by military, and a lot of military that are supervised by civilians as well, and so. That could work to a disadvantage as well. Saying, if you don't give me this promotion, I'll say that you raped me, or things of that nature. So it's not just physical. It's also like you said, how it's been referenced before, the gun in the room.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if even if it is not like the gun in the room, isn't necessarily a physical thing. It's a threat. That's all it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's how much of a difference is there a threat between I will take away your life with a bullet and I will take away your life with this social this social ostracization that I can force on you with my words.
Yep, letting the federal government be my agent and going ahead and just legally shooting you in the head.
Yeah, and it's just. It's an appalling situation, and feminists can only make it worse because they have absolutely zero understanding, care, or appreciation for the male experience of this situation. And and the reality is, it's like the fox guarding the henhouse to put them in charge of rape policy. I guarantee, I would imagine that a lot of female predators are really attracted to a mythology in which they don't exist. And they don't have to concern themselves with the morality of their actions.
Nope.
And that really is what feminism offers them. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm going to go ahead and finish up. I just want to say one thing to Karen. I started getting paying more attention to the men's rights movement, however people want to say it, through, of course, like a lot of people, watching your videos, Karen. And I just want to say, I mean, to everybody on the radio, on the show, everything that you do is wonderful, and I appreciate it. But Karen, it's just, how sometimes you'll maybe you're working on something, or whatever, you'll listen to music in the background. When it comes to your videos, sometimes I'll just go back and listen to some of your old videos that I've listened to several different times. You one of your first videos, Feminism and the Disposable Male, and your responses to Danielle Paradis, and another one when you talked about the military draft and how it related to feminism and the vote, and just your videos are wonderful. I know you get a lot of praise for them, but I just wanted to say thank you to you for them. You deliver your opinions so eloquently, and it's just a joy to listen to you. And just thank you very much.
And Fred, I've got one other thing that I want to point out. The military is a very personal issue for me. While you're still in, drop as many logic bombs as you possibly can.
I do my best.
Get some of these young soldiers turned on to what is really going on out there.
No, I try as best as I can. I mean, I'm not sitting there and going up to everybody. I mean, hey, did you know this about feminism? Hey, did you know this about sexual assault in the military? Hey, did you know this about that?
Right. But I'm sure in your personal counselings or if you're in charge of a platoon or something like that, it's relatively easy to take the conversation and steer it in the appropriate direction.
I was going to say, like I said, I'm a statistics guy, and when somebody asks my opinion about something, regardless of what it is, I just lay out the statistics for them, and if they need sources cited, I cite the sources for them, because you can argue opinion, but you can't argue statistics and you can't argue facts. And once you throw the facts out there, it's much easier to get your point across. And it's I try it, but it's slow going. But you put the idea in one person's head, and that person puts the idea in two people's head, and then 4 people's heads, and pretty soon it gains momentum. So, but again, thank you everybody there. Everybody on the show, everybody who works behind the scenes on the show. You guys do a wonderful job. I enjoy listening absolutely every single time that I can, and I look forward to more very interesting and invigorating intellectual conversations about issues that affect men. So thank you very much, guys.
Well, thanks for coming on and talking to us.
All right. Hopefully I'll
have a good
be
night.
calling again soon. All right. Take care.
Yep, you too. So, shall we bring on another person who's been waiting very patiently, Iron John? And I know James informed me that it takes a few seconds before I actually say the name for the person to be able to be on the show. So I will just fill in those few seconds with some talking about basically nothing, but hopefully that'll make sure that there's no empty air. And I think there we go.
Looks like Iron John dropped, so if he can call back in, that would be very much appreciated.
Is there anyone else that we can bring on?
No, unfortunately, there is not.
Okay, well, why don't we go back to our hosts and see if they have anything more to say. We might have to start winding it down here, guys. So, did you guys have any final statements, final words on the topic?
Oh, well, hold on. Iron John, are you here?
Okay, well, it looks like this is going to be a bit too difficult to get him back on. So, Hannah, Sage, Karen, are you guys there? You guys have gotten so quiet in the meantime.
I'm here.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I remember we had. I remember that we were going to have a brief mention of one thing that Fred mentioned that I thought was an interesting area to explore was. I'm going to keep this very brief, but the discussion of how feminists kind of get into these areas. And one example that kind of comes to my mind when you mentioned that was the Girl Effect, which was this project that does. I don't know what they do. It's just another generic promotion of women and education and increasing their well-being across the world. And the thing that when you look behind the scenes at the organizations backing them, you find out that the network is often very powerful, and the institutional powers that they have can often reach not only into the mainstream media, but often into government associations or UN or something like that. And it would not surprise me if just at any time in all sectors of life and all sectors of government, there's always going to be some connection somewhere so that you could have the power necessary to shame an institution or to introduce some level of coercion that will introduce the ideological presence. It really is just a new church. It really is. It's essentially a church that is of the Dark Ages of variety. So that's all I have to say about that. And yeah, Anita Sarkeesian sucks. Thank you.
Okay, it sounds like John is on the line. John, can you hear us? John, are you on the air?
Just 1 second. Let me transfer him over.
Okay. We need a little bit of music here. Unfortunately, I'm not musically inclined.
Nice,
No. Hello, John, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, so what did you want to bring to the table tonight?
Not a great deal, except to ask a question. Am I the only person who feels shell-shocked by all the rape charges that suddenly turn out to be not just misplaced, but fraudulently filed, and suddenly when the cases go south, no one wants to say a word about them. Pardon?
They disappear from the media?
Yeah, I generally watch MSNBC, but when the case against the Brigadier General went into the toilet, not another word. I don't know why that. Maybe it was because in the past most of the defendants have been members of minority groups who couldn't get a fair trial anyway, and so nobody really thought to ask whether there was an injustice done. But good God, it's everything from that gal in Nassau County, the Hofstra College case. To, I mean, it seems like there's like a new one every week, and I'm wondering if
and the military wants to report them when there's accusations, but not when the accusations are proved false.
Oh yes, oh that's right. I just, I mean, are these other than the sanction for $120,000, which to me is a bargain? I'm not even sure that's dischargeable in bankruptcy if they can prove that it was fraudulently incurred. But does it seem like there are an awful lot of these? Is it just because white males are having these things alleged against them? We hear all the time about guys who get out of prison on DNA evidence. I mean, that's pretty rock solid. But it seems like there's an awful lot of them in the last couple of years.
Honestly, when it comes to the media, it seems like this is a fairly common behavior and it's been that way pretty much all of my adult life. I would say possibly into my youth. They made a big deal about they've made a big deal about pretty much every high-profile accusation that's come about, and then just sort of tapered off as each of the false accusations have died in court.
Like Emily Littell saying, "Never mind."
Well, and I think part of it is it's the whole dirty laundry thing. That there's more scandal and more drama to them if the accusation is true, because they recognize the heinousness of a sex crime. They recognize that it's a terrible thing to rape somebody or otherwise sexually assault somebody. They don't quite have a grasp on how horrible it is to be falsely accused, and what a horrible thing it is to do to somebody, to falsely accuse them, not just of any old thing, but a heinous crime that is going to be reputation destroying. I mean, it's the wrecking ball of accusations. And that's one where they don't necessarily recognize that as something as exploitable in the yellow journalism sense. That they aren't necessarily going to be able to exploit that for sales or page views or things like that.
Sure.
People get outraged over sex crime accusations, but for some reason, the general public isn't just naturally stirred to the level of outrage over a false accusation leveled by a woman that they are to outrage over a rape committed by a man against a woman. And and a lot of it probably has to do with the lack of perception of female agency. A lot of it has to do with the way people view men as stronger and women as weaker. But it really kind of boils down to people simply not recognizing that false accusation being as wrong as it is, and certainly not being as wrong as a sex crime.
Well, it seems like people would have remembered the Scottsboro Boys at some point. I mean, yes, these things do happen. That was something that occurred long before I was born. But I guess it'll take a while for the lesson to sink in. In any event, I would like to echo what the last caller said with regard to everybody who works there. I look forward to getting this broadcast every Thursday, and I look through the channels of the people who participate, and it's enormously edifying and enjoyable, actually, in a sort of morbid way. But Allison,
yeah,
when are you going to do another hamster video?
I'm not
I
sure.
got a kick out of those.
Yeah, they were fun. They were fun. But I've been doing more, and this is sort of not really on topic, but I'll say it. I've been doing more with my animation and props.
I noticed.
To try to present issues in a more simplified way.
Well, I thought the hamster was cute anyway.
Yeah, but it's a cute
all right,
little...
Well, listen, thank you very much all, and look forward to next week.
Oh yeah, and do come in again if you have something to add to the topic. Your call is appreciated. Everybody's calls is appreciated. Okay.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Take care.
You're welcome. You take care too. So we're getting towards the end of the show. Unless there's another caller, I think we better start wrapping it up. Co-hosts, do we have some final words to speak on this issue? The issue of sexual assault in the military.
Well, yeah, all the things I wanted to say have been said before when we thought Iron John was not going in, so I'm good.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to reiterate my skepticism that the feminist approach to this social problem can do anything but create more problem. It really is either irrelevant or just adding to the issue. They're just overlaying a toxic ideology, and they're missing huge pieces of the puzzle in the process. And it's in many cases it's when you put a way of looking at the world first and then try to make the facts fit the way you look at the world, you don't find a solution. You just find more ways of applying this one fixed way of looking at the world everywhere. You just perpetuate that, and in fact you perpetuate the problem because you're never really understanding it in the first place. You're really just making the world conform, that becomes the problem. You're essentially creating more problem. And it particularly in this case, actually everything to do with feminism and rape seems to be, the more I look at it, the more that feminists don't know what they're talking about. They are pathologically incapable of recognizing male sexual vulnerability or recognizing that men have social vulnerability as well in terms of false rape accusations. And because they're categorically unable to take in these data points, they can never create an appropriate solution. They can never really even identify the problem appropriately. In the case of rape in the military, I mean, huge portions of the problem just disappear from reporting and disappear from their theorizing and disappear from their so-called awareness campaigns. And when you're rendering groups of victims of rape invisible, you're not helping by definition. And this is a situation where the fox is guarding the henhouse, and we need to get the fox out of the henhouse before we can start addressing. Well, no, actually, getting the fox out of the henhouse will go very far to addressing the disappearance of the hens. You know, getting feminists out of these so-called advocacy positions, these sexual violence advocacy positions, getting their toxic ideology out of there will go so far to actually starting to develop a solution, and go so far to stop hiding the malfeasance of women in this issue, the role that women play in promoting and perpetuating sexual assault throughout the generations by sexually assaulting children, and and even sexually assaulting adult men and other women. I mean, it just boggles the mind that you're just going to throw these victims under the bus to promote your ideology, to promote your supposed solution. And like I said, the more I look into how feminists have dealt with rape, the more I don't want to say disgusted, but the more horrified I become. Because you don't render groups of people invisible when they're victims of rape just because they don't fit your social theory. And the other thing is that the social theory itself is sexually abusive. They're essentially saying that men, by virtue of being male, a virtue of having masculinity, a virtue of having penises, are rapey. Or that men rape because they get masculinity points out of it. And that rape is really a emergent property of being masculine, or emergent property of men in groups, or an emergent property of men who aren't corralled and confined by feminist theory. And that is a hideous thing to say. It's a hideous thing to say to a group of people, and incidentally, saying that about a group of people, saying that they were innately rapey, innately sexually predatory, saying that about a group of people throughout history has been one large part of the process of justifying killing them, marginalizing them socially and legally, and ostracizing them from their communities. I mean, this is one step in the process of creating a society-wide toxic threat narrative against a marginalized group. I mean, you see it with black men during the Jim Crow eras. You see it with Jewish people since forever. You see it with almost every marginalized group. You start by saying that their sexuality is toxic and predatory and shaming them. And for some reason, humans just have this incredible trigger when it comes to that. And I've spoken a lot, and I'm just going to open up the floor really quick to Karen, if she's out there. Karen, out there in the mist, are you there? Okay, I think Karen is... Oh, wait, I hear something. Karen? Oh, no, I think Karen has gone AWOL. So we're going to end the show. It is that time again, time to give thanks. I would like to thank my co-hosts for being part of the show and making it always very fabulous. And also the volunteers who help us out, Rachel and Alyssa, and Yule, our artist, and Europa, who creates the show art every week, and Phil, who does the animation, James, who does the production end of this radio show, Men's Rights Reddit, who puts up a sticky for us every week, A Voice for Men for hosting the radio show, and all of our donors and subscribers. Thanks. Same Badger station, same Badger time. Good night.
This is Honey Badger Radio, reminding you to take the red pill.